Empire.
Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John County Report wherever you get your podcasts. You're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Empire Media. That's A-M-P-I-R-E. Always much appreciated when you tune in. And don't forget, you can read my work on ESPN.com. In a minute, I'll be joined by the Washington Post, Nicki Jhabvala, as we kind of talk about what we've seen so far in the spring workouts. We've been able to go to a couple rookie practices, one OTA practice. We've all seen Jaden Daniels for a few times. We've all been around the energy a little bit now to get at least a little bit of a feel for some of the changes and just some of the thoughts and questions we still have about the roster and the team in general, but also some observations from what we've seen. And so good talk with Nicki, as it always is. We did not talk a lot about the schedule at all, really about one little thing, because it had not come out yet when we recorded, but it has come out now. So I'm going to give you I'm sure you've seen it. And so you don't need me to tell you a whole lot about it. The things that have jumped out to me is, first of all, they have the 15th toughest schedule in the thing. And that's based on the one loss record from last year. It's an interesting stat, but don't know what it means because teams change over the course of a season. This team I would think is better than it was last year. So are they a 4-13 team now? No, I don't view them that way. How good they are, I don't know. Or how good they'll be, who knows? But the point is, those records change, and it's kind of hard to look at a game in May, look at a game 6 months from now and think, oh, that's going to be a tough game, because we don't know. Injuries are everything. And the whole thing with this team is like they've undergone so many changes that it's just hard to know what the heck they're going to do, which is why the season will be very interesting. But only one Monday Night Football game in week 3 against the Bengals. That is, I thought there would be 2. I thought they'd have the Bears for sure with Caleb Williams. I thought that was a layup Monday night game. It is not. It is a regular 1:00 game in October. The Monday night game will be at Cincinnati because it's 2 LSU Heisman Trophy winning quarterbacks, Joe Burrow and Jaden Daniels. Some interesting quarterback matchups, which we already knew about because they're going to face Lamar Jackson. Look at in the first few weeks, you have Joe Burrow, then you have Kyler Murray, you have Lamar Jackson and Bryce Young, and Jaden Daniels talked about what he likes that Cliff Kingsbury did with Kyler Murray in Arizona. Then you have Lamar Jackson, the guy that he grew up really obviously liking quite a bit, and Bryce Young, who's a good friend of his. And then obviously Burrow with the LSU ties. That's pretty interesting. Anyways, then the other thing that, to be honest, kind of stinks is another December bye. It's 3. I don't know how this team has gotten 3 years in a row with a December bye. I think that's really unfortunate. And the one good thing for them is that they travel the fewest amount of miles of any team in the NFL this year. So I guess that's kind of an offset of that. But I think a December bye is very tough, especially, I think that's very tough. And to have it 3 years in a row is, to me, kind of ridiculous. But that's what it is. They also finish with very strong NFC East implications because 5 of their last 7 games are against NFC East teams, 6 of the last 7 against NFC foes. So if they're in the playoff hunt at all, which you would think at that point they it would think they'd still would be at that point going into that stretch, that's going to make or break everything for them. So a lot of interesting things, but you can go to ESPN.com and you can see the schedule and deduce for yourself what it's like. And I think you'll be able to figure it out. So, I don't like to make record predictions for a team in May based on what we see, because we haven't seen this team. There's so much to learn about this team, and just we've seen 3 practices and 1 with veterans, and that's it. So I'm not a big fan of record predictions in May or any time before. I'm not a fan of it at all, but you get the point. Anyway, the preseason games, they're playing. The first game is at the New York Jets, second game at the Miami Dolphins, and then home against the New England Patriots, and an NBC primetime game on August 25th, which I don't know why they're going to have that in primetime, because it's not like Drake May or Jaden Daniels. I wouldn't think they're going to play. So it might be Marcus Mariota against Jacoby Brissett. Lost my mindset for a minute. So anyways, that's it. Those are some nuggets from the schedule. I actually think that there's some decent stretches there. I don't think there's any, I think there's some tough stretches because you got the Bengals, Browns, and Ravens in 3 out of 4 weeks. But I think there's some games that there it will be very interesting, and we'll see. We'll get into what they're going to do later in the year. So, but that schedule's out. Go check it out on ESPN.com. Here's my conversation with the Washington Post's Nicki Jhabvala. Trades, free agents, quarterbacks, and all kinds of adventures await the Commanders this offseason. Looking for an adventure of your own? The Adventure Park at Sandy Spring has you covered. The country's largest ropes course and zipline park, located in Montgomery County, Maryland, is now open. Named Best Amusement Park and Climbing Destination in the DMV 2 years in a row, the Adventure Park at Sandy Spring is perfect for birthdays, corporate outings, groups, and families. With challenges anywhere from beginner to expert, there is something for all skill levels. Anytime you're thinking about reaching new heights, make sure you know before you go. The Adventure Park at Sandy Spring is the only ACCT accredited park in Maryland or Virginia. Staying on the ground, give axe throwing a try. You can throw at traditional targets or play any number of interactive games. You can even upload your own image. So there you have it, folks. Climbing, ziplining, axes, food, and bonfires right in your backyard. Reserve your adventure today at www.theadventurepark.com/Kime. That's www.theadventurepark.com/Kime. Well, Nicki, I'm having Nicki on. Nicki heard there was a youth movement out at Commander's facility. So she thought she'd bring her own little youth to the OTA practice on Tuesday. How did Julian's tryout go?
I mean, I think he did pretty well. He showed him what he had. He felt confident going in. Really loved the feedback he got from the staff. No, he was great. He slept the whole time. It was great. It was ideal.
So he's already sleeping through meetings. So I think there may be a fine for that later on. But I would say this from Art, he was very well behaved. So very good job. And it was good to see him as always. So anyways, but let's talk about the other youngsters that were out in the field.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about the veterans too, but let's start with the youngsters. And people have heard my opinion. I'm tired of talking. I want to hear your opinion and what you saw at the rookie minicamp first, what you saw from that group.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing I like the most, and I know everybody wants to hear about Jaden Daniels and how he looked throwing passes with no defense on air. But I really like the structure of these practices. They're always moving. They're using both fields. These are things that we did not see over the last 4 years here, where to me, it, always felt a bit lackadaisical for a professional sports team. This group it's anything but. I mean, guys are always moving. They have multiple drills going on multiple times. At the first OTA practice, they had 2 sets of 7-on-7s using both fields. So everybody is involved. Everybody's getting reps. Everybody's moving. And I thought it was great because you get to see a glimpse of everybody and you get to see how they work with different groups of people. So, Jaden mixed it up and the receivers he had, and I thought it was good. I thought it was a good chance to just kind of see how he worked with some of the other veterans, how some of the other rookies worked with the vets. So I never want to get too far ahead of myself after OTAs, especially one OTA practice. I mean, it's the happiest time of year for every team. So, there's still a long ways to go. I mean, it's like install everything like that, but it was good to see. It was good to see how this new regime operates.
And it's funny, and I do want to kind of go back to what you said about the 7-on-7 because that's a good point. And usually, so people listening, like in training camp, for example, if you had 7-on-7, you may have on one side of the field 7-on-7, the other side is O-line, D-line, some one-on-ones or things like that. And maybe on another field, you may have something else going on, but you don't usually see 2 7-on-7 groupings at once. And so it gave Jaden Daniels a chance to get a lot of reps, but also gave Mariota, and then, going against some starter types, whatever, you're right. It gives guys a lot more reps. That also, I think, ties into maybe the energy of the
Yeah.
practice.
Yes. Much
How
different.
different is that for you?
Yeah, no, and that to me is the biggest difference. And yes, it's all new players. There's so much more intrigue given everything, not just Jaden Daniels and the other new guys they brought in, but the energy is palpable. I mean, it's, I think most of us have, cited the bags drill that they do at the start of practice just to kind of set the tone with the energy. And it's, we've seen every team, every player do a bags drill every now and then, but it's not the entire team at once while every coach is yelling and screaming and, really trying to raise the energy before they take the field. So it's a tone setter. And guys clearly feed off of it because that's how they continue the rest of practice.
I
Yeah,
do
I
what,
love it.
yeah. And I do wonder though, how some of the older vets, like is Zach Ertz, how much like I'm genuinely curious. I'm not even trying
Yeah.
to, but I'm curious, like what and we didn't necessarily, I think some of those guys are really enjoying the new energy and the new vibe. So I think it all ties in together, but I do wonder with some of those guys, like, this is my like 9th camp. And are we doing this really? This is
Yeah.
May, whatever, but it does add some energy to it. And I think it
Yeah.
speaks to the tone that they want to set here going forward.
I feel like to be successful in the NFL, you have to like not be as cynical as say me. Because there's just
Right.
a lot of the cliches and the rah-rah and like these are grown men screaming while running over bags. Like it's a little ridiculous on its surface, but if you buy into it, it seems to work.
Mhm.
So I think the vets, from what I've noticed anyway, I get the sense that they buy into it. They know kind of what makes them tick. They find ways to like gain extra motivation. So while they go through the hoops with the full team, they also know, how to get themselves going.
Right. And I think that other thing too is it goes back to the change. I think, if you're a John Allen or Terry McLaurin, now ultimately for a guy like McLaurin, it's going to be like, what kind of symmetry does he have with Jaden Daniels? Right.
Right.
But I think there's also has to be a freshness for them that they can feel.
Right.
And I think like I mean, how happy do you think Jahan Dotson was? And we talked to him yesterday. How happy do you think that guy is?
Yeah, and I mean, I thought a lot of the quotes were telling. I mean, they've been pretty honest. They're not going to tell you everything, but you peel back the layers on some of these, and they're pretty honest, talking about sort of the comfort level they have with their offensive coordinator, and how they, just generally how they feel the operations are going. That there's more communication. Sam Cosmi mentioned that. That they like the scheme. They feel like there's, going in, not, obviously it hasn't been fully installed, but just in the early glimpses, it seems to have a better balance and run past. So little things like that. And you can tell guys are much more, I would say, optimistic. I feel like, again, it's the happiest time of year. Everybody feels like they have a Super Bowl contender at this point in the offseason. But I mean, for the guys who have cycled through quarterback after quarterback and coordinator after coordinator, you do kind of sense that they feel like there's hope for a real change, but for guys like Terry too, they've gotten up before and only to be disappointed. So I would not be surprised if there's some like reservations there. Just
sure. I think you want to see, I think they all like, just like
Yeah.
fans listening, like they're going to want to see, okay, this is all great. Let's see it in September,
Right.
October, November. And we're both of us would be with all those. And I think the players and the coaches would be too. Like that's ultimately where it's going to matter. But I do think the energy matters. And how much like when you compare it to the last couple of years, did you ever feel like it was like this at all? Because sometimes we get swept up. We get swept up in the recency bias sometimes.
Sure. Yeah.
But I just think the staff brings more. But what do you think?
I mean, I felt like thinking back to last year, I think there was a good bit of optimism, largely because of the then perspective ownership change. I think that kind of lifted a black cloud that had been hanging over the franchise for quite some time.
24 years.
And I think, I mean, the Bieniemy hire was still fresh. He's coming off a Super Bowl victory. I think there was some optimism that he could rejuvenate the offense and get things going. And this was pre-training camp where things started to be like, oh, maybe this isn't going so well type vibes. But yeah, I think I think we thought this last year. Granted, I think there was more reservations, of course, about the quarterback. Sam Howell, I think there was definitely intrigue, especially the year following with the way he played against the Cowboys. But there's a different feeling when you bring in a guy like Jaden Daniels. I mean, he's a number 2 overall pick for a reason. He was the best player in college football last year. So I think that changes the tone more than anything right now. Previously in the offseason, I would say it was, Adam Peters was the biggest.
Right. I would agree with that. But since you brought up Jaden Daniels, let's stick there for a minute. Because
quarterback.
But he is the number one reason. No, I shouldn't say number. Well, he's a huge reason why this team is intriguing, if nothing else, right? And
I would say he's the number one.
Yes, okay, thank you. So,
yeah.
Right, without a doubt, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So, but I'm curious, like what you saw from him. We're out there Tuesday. We're out there for the rookie mini camp. What are some of the things that you've learned or seen from him over those couple of days?
Yeah, I mean, he's got a great ball. There's no doubt about that. I mean, you have to remember these guys are thrown to receivers who are facing no defenders. But I mean, he's got a beautiful release. The velocity is incredible. Accuracy, very noticeable. Mobility, very noticeable. He's not nearly as thin as I was sort of anticipating, because it's hard to tell when they're in uniforms during the college season. Now, granted, the bar is set pretty low in Washington, having seen Emmanuel Forbes come in last year. So, but he's not as slight as I thought. I still think he needs to put on a good bit to maintain himself in the NFL. It's a different ballgame. But I thought he looked good. It seemed like his rapport with Kingsbury was really good. I liked how involved Kingsbury was with the quarterbacks. He stayed pretty much exclusively with the quarterbacks in these couple of practices we've watched from minicamp to OTAs. He seems coachable. He seems to take to the coaching. Seems like he has a good rapport with other teammates based on what the guys have said, just seeing them on the field. So I think those are all great things. And I don't know that you could really gain much more from these practices just yet. I think as they kind of build on, they continue to install and really ramp up competition elsewhere. There's no quarterback competition. Anybody that says there's a quarterback competition, please don't ever say that. But, I think the more they continue to build on these workouts and practices, we'll see more and more. But yeah, I think the early glimpses are very good.
But Mariota was working when the...
Stop it. I'm gonna hit the leave button on this.
But the other thing too that to me jumps out is, and I think it was Ben Sinnott talked about this, the personality, constantly smiling and all that. I don't know. I mean, listen, ultimately you're a leader by your actions and all that, but it does seem like he has a personality that people warm up to him. Yeah. And I think that's a good thing for a leader. And there's different ways of leadership, but I think that to me has jumped out too. When you watch him, there seems to be maybe a little bit of an energy that comes from that sort of demeanor. Yeah. You think?
We've had 2 press conferences with this kid. Mm-hmm. He looks comfortable out there. He looks confident, but he doesn't come off, at least to me, in the, again, few times we've seen him. Right. He doesn't come off as cocky. He seems like he gets along with pretty much everybody out there. And that's one of the things he did say, kind of prided himself on, is he can do that. We'll see as it goes on throughout camp and everything with the vets. I mean, yesterday was literally their first workout with the vets. So, and it was like, not even an hour and a half, I want to say, but it does, you do get the sense that he feels comfortable being out there. He understands the spotlight. And as they install more, we'll see just how comfortable he is with the terminology, the playbook, command of the huddle, etc.
As we move into the spring, who are some of the guys that you're maybe most aside from Daniels and his development, because that's going to be in every practice thing. We're going to talk about that.
Sure.
But who are some of the other guys as far as like their development or just their progress that you are, or for whatever reason you're interested in seeing?
Rookie or vet, or just rookies?
Doesn't matter. Yeah. Wide open choice here, Nicki.
Yeah. I mean, I'll say the entire linebacking core, but primarily Frankie Louvu and Bobby Wagner. I like watching the interactions between Bobby Wagner and other guys, other veterans, other rookies. Just, and Sam Cosme brought this up too about, interactions where Bobby Wagner will tell him, he can call out. Cosme cited this, like, he was in a 3-point stance and Bobby Wagner called out that he's pulling, and Cosme was like, how the heck did you know that? I was trying to disguise that. And Bobby explained how he was tipping his, what he was going to do. So little interactions like that, you can see him kind of going up and talking to some of the younger guys, or even the vets, Frankie Louvu, trying to, gain some knowledge from him. To me, that's really interesting. And then Louvu himself, just because, he had a heck of a season in Carolina. He was their top free agent signing, and that's been a position of need for years for them. So I think he's their most intriguing free agent signing. That's just my opinion, purely subjective. I just think he could. He's the one that was signed to a longer term deal to be a sort of a staple of that defense. In his prime, I think he could really have a significant impact on the defense. If all goes well, of course. And then as far as like rookies, I mean, I'm intrigued by Luke McCaffrey. I'm sorry. Like, I think I agree with Kingsbury. I think his story is phenomenal.
Right.
I mean, of course he's McCaffrey, he's got exceptional genes. It's ridiculous. Save some for the rest of us. But the guy he played quarterback at Nebraska, and then 2 years gets drafted in the NFL as a receiver, which, a lot of people change positions. Not everybody can play each to that level. So I think he's intriguing, and then just sort of where he fits in with this receiving core, because it's Terry, and then I think there's some gray area there on who's 2 and 3. So, how will that shake out? That'll be one I'm following for sure.
Well, and to me, McCaffrey's intriguing. I know. Listen, he wasn't drafted in the 3rd round because of his name. Like,
right,
you don't get drafted that high. At that, somebody's got now. You say, okay, he's this, we see this, and we know the family he comes from, and we know what they've done. We're going to bet on the upside with that, but still you're a 3rd round pick because the team really likes you. And so, and I think, but I'm intrigued. So when you say that, what are your thoughts on Dotson then, if you're not sure about 2 and 3 and going forward?
I mean, I think Dotson is still the best route runner in this team. And that's no slight against Terry. I think Terry's a very, very good route runner. I just think there's something so smooth and fluid, and the way Dotson can create separation is ridiculous. I mean, he said he wasn't a fan of his season last year. I think you just want to see more consistency. And then health, of course. He hasn't had the greatest luck with that. So, if he can play a full season and play closer to his potential, I think he's clearly the number 2. It's just, given the most recent history, not entirely sure. So, but I think he still has like an insane ceiling. I mean, I think he's a phenomenal receiver.
And I think he's at the top of his route. He creates better separation. I think Terry gets away better at the line, in press coverage, for example. And so
it's really,
and they're different. But I would like, I've always liked watching Jahan run routes in practices, and that's why I'm curious to see what the impact on those 2 guys running their routes is on a guy like McCaffrey, who is still, while he's pretty, I think he could develop there. I think there's some little subtleties at that position that he can learn from them, and, how to hold your head and when to, et cetera. The little things that I think can make a difference for him. I do wonder about that position overall, though.
Yeah.
Just like, do they have enough depth?
Yeah. And clearly they do, bringing in Martavis Bryant for a workout. So, I don't think this roster is done by any means. An NFL team's roster is never done at this point in the season. We're going to see turnover, maybe not at key starting positions. But I mean, they're going to be changing it probably up until the week before, even after they set their full roster with waiver claims and all that. So,
And that's what Quinn talked about that the other day
Yeah.
about when he was asked about the tackle position. He's like, he's not going to worry about it at this point. What's your level of
Oh, I
concern?
worry about it at this point. I feel like that position's different. It's not like there's a lot of great left tackles just sitting out there in free agency. Right. And if they're on the waiver wire, that means they were cast aside by another team. Now, another team it may not have been a best fit or whatever, but you usually don't find like a stud left tackle off waiver claim. So, they're betting a lot on Brandon Coleman and Cornelius Lucas. Granted, I don't necessarily blame them. I'm glad they didn't overspend to try to move back into the first and try to get somebody. I still like Johnny Newton, even though he just underwent a second, foot surgery. So, you can't fix it all in 1 year.
No, and I also wonder, I'm sure from a fan perspective, you'd probably feel a little bit better if there was a guy who's been a full-time starter at that position versus a guy who's been a backup and a guy who's been a rookie who's never played. Yeah. And then Wiley on the right side, who had his own struggles last year. So, I think that's why I wonder, will there be a starting quality tackle that becomes available and what would they do? And I know there's like Donovan Smith's out there, but he's still, 2 teams now in the last 2 years. So they've decided they want to move on from him for whatever, a lot of penalties with him. But that's the one I'm watching too, is would something happen there? And does somebody become available that tempts them? Because clearly right now, nobody has.
Yeah. You don't want Jaden Daniels to get killed by week 4.
No,
saw the number of hits Sam Howell took. And yes, some of them were on Sam Howell.
Right.
But, you can't have that.
And I think the one thing too, because listen, you can do things to help the offensive line. At some point, they're going to have to line up one-on-one and make your blocks. Do you have confidence they can do that? You can only do so much, but I do wonder if you can strengthen the interior, which I think with Biotish and Allegretti, I think they have at the left guard, but we don't know for sure. Cosme, I thought, did really well. So if you can if you strengthen that, maybe you create some gaps for the kid to run through. And then, but that's not the ideal way to help him. That, so you do have to get that guy. Like Coleman is going to be one that is going to be, to me, a very much one under the microscope for a 3rd round pick.
Yep. Yeah. And I no longer believe anybody when they say we can help the line with extra protection. No, stop it. How many times did we hear that last year?
Well, we did.
There were a lot of things going on last year, but it
didn't work.
That should never be your solution for we can just give them some extra. No.
And the funny thing is, even in that Giants game up in New York, it took a half to get to that point. I know. And by that point,
Giants game and the Bears game was just mind-numbing.
Correct. And that's, and that's where I say, there are things you can do to help. You can run the ball more. You can do some things with the tight end. You can create some motion or movements to sometimes fool them or slow the rush, play acts, whatever. But eventually you've got to get solid play. And it doesn't have to be at this point. You're not going to, Pro Bowl play, you're not going to get, but if you can get solid, consistent play, you can build on that. And
but are you going to find that on the waiver claim?
I think it's going to be hard.
Who's giving up a reliable, consistent left tackle?
They're not right. Your starter, exactly. No, I know. And
you're getting in no disrespect to Cornelius Lucas, I think he's been good in spurts. I just don't think he's been good enough consistently to be viewed as that long-term solution. Correct. But I think you generally get more of that caliber player on the waiver wire, and that's
right. And unless the only thing, and you kind of look through the teams that drafted tackles, even those teams, there aren't a lot where you'd say, okay, this guy could come free, because in some cases, and I had this written down somewhere in my office, but I don't know where it is, because I looked at the list, there's very few choices that will become available. Because, Charles Leno became available at a certain point in the spring a few years ago, and he was at least a consistent left tackle and a guy who has started and know how to play and, et cetera. So I think, but those guys are hard to find. That doesn't happen very often. The Jets drafted a tackle and they signed Tyler Smith and Moses, but they're not getting rid of one of those guys. So that's where it's going to become hard. And so that's one to certainly monitors how he develops. And then, a guy like Emmanuel Forbes and St. Jude, how do they develop in a new defense? Those are two
Right.
other ones that I'm watching.
Right.
So, I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on them?
Emmanuel Forbes I don't know what to make it. I think he'll make the roster, obviously,
Yeah.
but does he stay all 4 years if he doesn't really, really show out this year?
No, I don't think so.
Does he immediately start this year? Does he
No,
start?
he does not immediately start. There's no way they could do that. Just because after this year he had, I don't know how you could do that. You've got to see more from him. And I mean, what do you think the impact on the coaching change will be on those two in particular?
Significant. I don't think Emmanuel Forbes starts even after, as they get into week 1. I don't think he starts. So significant. And then the ripple effect of that is another first round pick that is not a staple for at least 4 years. Jahan Dotson is maybe the only one of the last 4 classes that may actually play out as rookie contract.
Well, but I was also talking about impact, not just their like or dislike of just the coaching on their games too.
Yeah. No,
that's the part that I'm wondering about. But yes, I'm with you. Like, I don't know for a man. I'm not going to sit there and say it was only that, but how significant could that aspect be?
I think it could be huge. Again, and we've talked about this, but I will always say there's 2 parts of that though. I think having coaches who can teach and are willing to develop and, do it well, that's awesome. The player has to be willing to receive it though. And I'm not saying Emmanuel Forbes is not willing, but I think that's the other piece of it that we still need to see is, how does he take to the coaching? Does it, does he embrace it? And does he, does it translate quickly? Or does it take him a little bit to really, improve some of the things that were lacking last year?
And I would say, like, just for people listening, I talked about him on the podcast from my OTA observations on Tuesday. Just some things you saw. It's a baseline. And so there's some things that, coaches can start working on them now. So I'll be curious to see what happens with him and how this game look. But you're right. Like, coaches can help you. They can absolutely help you. But I think Quinn has made it clear too. They're there to support you. They're going to tell you things. You've got to do it then. And they're not on the field with you. So coaching can only take you so far.
Right.
So, and that's the other thing. Any other early observations from any of the little that we've been able to see? Any players that jump out to you at all?
I think Tyler Biadasz could be really good in the middle. I know you kind of touched on him a bit. I think he could be really good. He's fun to watch in practice.
Why is that?
Just the energy. I mean, I think he's a really good player too,
Right.
But I just think just the energy. I think he could kind of be that guy that you look to as sort of him and Cosme as sort of the anchors of that line. So I'm intrigued by that. I think Allegretti could be fun. Ton of energy there. I think that's another intriguing one. And like that signing, you look at the numbers they gave him. Not typically a starter level pay. So he said he really wants to earn his way to the starting role, but we'll see.
Kind of in that in between where like it's a low price starter or a higher price backup.
Right. It's an earn it role in my mind. Like you got to earn that starting role. And I think he can. So we'll see.
And I think, I agree with you. How important with that, when you were in the Cosme scrum yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you sense from him? Because at the end of the year, I'm not sure anybody was more annoyed.
Yeah, he was pretty beside himself. Yeah.
He was, I would say, pissed off.
Yeah.
So that's a better phrase.
Yeah.
How did he seem to you yesterday? Because I was in, I think, with Jahan Dotson at the same time.
Very optimistic, very relieved, very optimistic. I think he likes all the changes that he's seen so far. Again, talking about that run pass balance, he was another one that wished they had run the ball out more, which I think everybody wanted. but he was a strong proponent of that, especially for the guys up front. I mean, they made it so much harder for that line. So yeah, I think he likes the things this new regime has done. He feels like there's more. This was another thing multiple players said, not just Cosme, how he feels like there's more of a culture of accountability, which many players last year cited was kind of missing from the top down. So I thought that was notable, of, players holding each other accountable more. Yeah, I thought it was a much different tone from him. And I think he's one who's becoming, much like Terry, is a really good gauge of kind of where things truly are at with the team.
As much as anybody.
Yeah. I mean, a very smart guy, very in tune with the rest of the locker room, and very honest about kind of how things are going, where things stand. So yeah, I really key in on what him and Terry say.
And it's funny because the accountability stuff, I mean, it only takes a few players to come in to help change that.
Right.
I go back to Wagner on that one.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's exactly what they thought too. I mean, he's a big one for that. So all right. Ertz too, I think could play a significant role there. So
all right, last thing, and as we're taping this, the schedule comes out after we talk. But I am curious, is there, because we already know the games are playing, is there a game there that, forget when, but I don't know if maybe it depends on when, like if they play Chicago early versus late, but is there a game or two that you're like, just more curious to see because for whatever reason?
I'd say Chicago definitely. That game last season was such a turning point in their season. They should have absolutely won that game, and they got demolished by, one of the worst teams in football. Well, Chicago looks a bit different now. With Caleb Williams, so it'll be a number 1 and number 2 in the draft going off against each other, and Montez Sweat be the first meeting. Montez was still in Washington when they last played the Bears, so that will be interesting. So that's one that I definitely have circled. I mean, I'm also really intrigued by the Ravens game, just to see. I mean, just hearing Jaden Daniels, how he's idolized Lamar Jackson, just seeing those two, there's some similarities. I never want to compare anybody to Lamar Jackson. I think he's an exceptional talent on his own right. So, but that could be a really fun game just to see those two go head to head.
I think it could be a lot of fun. And it's funny because Lamar it's hard to get, you don't get better than him for a quarterback that can run.
Right.
But I also think Jaden was a better passer in college. Than Lamar was. And so I'll be curious to see them on the same field and just how it looks. And I know they're different points of their career, but I think it could be a lot of fun. So
yeah, definitely.
So anything else, anything else you're looking for over the next couple of weeks?
No.
All right. Well, there you go.
No,
I appreciate the closing thoughts.
Yeah. I'm really insightful today.
There isn't, as and I mean, there you go. So, but there's only so much you can glean, but to me, this is always like a measuring, just a base measurement, and then see where things are at in the summer. And it's going to take a while before we really see how things shape up and to know what they might do. And even then, as I'll be curious, do they get a joint practice? And if so, against who? And what does that reveal? But it's so hard to always gauge what's going to happen. So anyways, Nicki, that's it. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Always enjoying
the whole time.
He did sleep the whole, well, I don't know if is that good or bad. We put him to sleep. I hope not. So he's probably just tired after attending practice yesterday. And you should have had him kind of do some 40-yard dashes where you got him in his little shoes and stuff. So
I know. Next time you got to ease him up, ramp him up,
There you go. Thanks, Nicki.
Of course.
That's it for this episode. Thanks to Nicki for joining me, and thank you as always for tuning in. I'll be back on Friday morning with another episode. Talk to you next time.
This This weekend, only at Macy's, it's our lowest prices of spring. How low? Diamond rings, pendants, and earrings, only $399, originally $1,500. Ninja blenders, now $89.99. And $395 men's designer suits, only $99.99. So if you're wondering why you should shop Macy's lowest prices sale, well, the name pretty much says it all. It's our lowest prices for one weekend only. Starts tomorrow at Macy's. Savings off already reduced prices. Exclusions apply.